Shabbat Shalom. Thank goodness for Shabbat. Shabbat is a day to rest and recover from the busy week behind us. Shabbat is also a day to reflect on the week that is now past and ask ourselves, what did I learn from these experiences this week? How must I plan a response to these experiences? And what are my next steps? What relationships grew stronger this week and how? Which were weakened and why? How did I show up in the world this week, we might ask? When was I at my best, at my most generous, my brightest? And we also need to ask, where did I fall down this week? What do I do with my regrets from this week? Which mitzvot did I carry and which ones were too heavy to lift? We might also look back over the week and say, where did God show up in the world this week? Where were God's blessings to be found? How do I express my gratitude for them as I walk through the world? Did I witness the wonder and the complexity of God's world? Did I ask myself, what do they demand of me? The founding rabbi of our sister congregation in Jerusalem, Kol Neshama, used to begin every Shabbat evening by inviting the congregation to privately review the week. Let's try it. He would say, Yom Echad, Sunday. Yom Sheni, Monday. Yom Shlishi, Tuesday. The exercise sounds very simple, and I admit that I am overwhelmed by it every time. I am unable to remember what happened even just yesterday. So Shabbat is a really necessary time for meditation, for sifting through the hours of the week now gone, and to draw meaning from them, from the countless swift and subtle interactions that we have with strangers, as well as from the conversations we have with dear ones. What opportunities to connect did we embrace, and which did we miss? What chances for goodness did we claim, and which did we let slip through our fingers, slip into what is now known as the past? On Shabbat, we are given the chance to rest, to recover, to restore, to reflect, and to ready ourselves for the week ahead, for what is now, for the moment, called the future. Our parasha is instructive. Sheshet yamim ta'aseh melacha, uvayom hashvi'i Shabbat Shabbaton, mikra kodesh, kol melacha lo ta'asu, Shabbat hi ladonai, bakol moshvotechem. On 6 days, work shall be done, but on the 7th day there shall be a Shabbat of complete rest, Shabbat Shabbaton, a sacred occasion, Mikra Kodesh. I'd like to focus for a moment on this phrase, Mikra Kodesh, because it is used uniquely here. Shabbat is not referred to this way in other places in the Torah. It's a difficult phrase to translate, actually. Our Chumash translates Mikra Kodesh as a sacred occasion, but more literally it means something like a declaration of sanctity. That's what Shabbat should be. A calling out of what is holy, an articulation of the sacred, an articulation of what needs to be discerned and separated, made distinct. So if that is the challenge of Shabbat, to reflect on the week past and see it more clearly, then I admit to you, I have a lot of thinking to do this Shabbat, because it has been a wild week. Even just keeping up with the weather is a challenge. One day, really cold, the next really hot like summer, and then last night, yesterday, those wild winds. It's enough to make our heads spin. And so I do need Shabbat to help me see my week better, to understand what meaning can be drawn from it, what distinctions and counter-distinctions can be held in a healthy tension as best I can. So I'll share with you 7 for the 7 days of the week. Didn't work out quite so cleanly, but it'll give you insight into some of the themes of the Jewish world today. Last Shabbat, some of you know, we discovered that 2 stained glass windows had been vandalized. And as a Jew, I felt very hurt by this. And as a rabbi of the sacred congregation, who is responsible for its well-being, I was actually angry about it. And then the very next day, Sunday evening, I attended that interfaith vigil at Mel Laskin Square. Some of you were there, where every human face could be seen and languages from every continent could be heard. I was invited to stand shoulder to shoulder with an imam and a monk and a minister and a Hindu priest and a rabbi in what felt like perfect harmony, mutual respect. And sitting in the crowd there were the mayor and the premier and the prime minister and the governor general, all silently validating religious freedom in this good city and in this good country. And there were police applauded, and the first responders received a standing ovation. Their presence, too, was reassuring and reminded us that there is protection for all religious peoples. And so suddenly, the cracks in that stained glass window seemed a little smaller. Seemed like an isolated incident, an act by a single person, lonely, pitiful. Our executive director, Russ Joseph, reassured the board and me that a restoration artist has already been contacted and that we can expect these beautiful windows intact, restored in time for the High Holy Days. Both things were true. Stained glass in our sanctuary, and thousands, tens of thousands, gathered in religious solidarity. Both true in the matter of a day. What else? I found myself in a taxi cab where all truths are revealed. And my driver picked me up, and he told me he'd been driving for 18 years. He had an accent, so I asked him, "Oh, where are you from?" He hesitated for a moment, and then he said, "I am from Lebanon. I am Palestinian." And I said, "Oh, good. That means we're cousins." He knew the neighborhood, right? And he took that as an invitation then to speak his truth. And he did. He said, "The Israelis only want to shoot us. Men, women, and children. They want no Palestinians in the land. They want it just for Israel." And he was angry. And we were getting onto the highway. And there was nowhere to go, and my life was in his hands. And so I politely said, "Well, you know, I know that story differently. There are many sides to that story. So instead, please tell me, have you ever been to Israel? Do you have family there?" And he said, "Yes, I still have family there. And I went for the first time to see them 6 years ago. They live outside in Akko and outside of Akko." And I said, "Oh, I've been to Akko. It's beautiful there." And then he said, "Yes, you know, Jews and Muslims and Christians, they all live very well together there." And he also said, "And, you know, I was so nervous to go to Israel. But they didn't ask me even one question at the airport. So suddenly, his heart softened, and we found common ground. And he told me about his wife's cooking, and I said, yes, I love those things too. Both true in one taxi cab ride. Another, I met with a young woman of the congregation this week. She came to see me because she was upset about how on campus at U of T, a classmate spoke out in very ugly ways about Jews and about Israel, and she was frozen. She didn't know how to respond. No one spoke up, not even the professor. And she needed help sifting it through. She admitted that she is at home as a leftist in all things. She's a liberal-minded person. She runs in those left-leaning circles, and yet she felt abandoned. And then that night, I went to an event for the UJA Book of Life. Maybe some of you were there. Our past president, Mark Anshin, was honored, and our congregants, Michael and Lori Davis, were honored. And the speaker that night was Jeannie Smith, who is the daughter of a Polish rescuer named Irene Gut-Opdyke. And Jeannie told her mother's story about how she had rescued Jews during the Shoah. Irene's book is called In My Hands. In My Hands. God bless her. And God bless those righteous among the nations who risked everything to protect Jews. Both things true in one day. Silent bystanders when words of hatred were spoken in the academy of the university, right here in Toronto. Silence and a story of remarkable courage. Another example, I think we're up to number 5. Reverend Alexa Gilmore was a minister who helped to organize that vigil, and we're getting to know each other. And we were debriefing a little bit a couple days after the interfaith vigil, and we both admitted to one another that we regret that none of the religious leaders, including us, acknowledged that the violence was, we believe, we have reason to believe, was intended violence against women in particular. 8 out of the 10 victims were women. And if 8 out of the 10 victims had been from a particular ethnic identity or religious identity, you could bet we would have shouted it out and shouted it down. But somehow, violence against women wasn't shouted out, wasn't shouted down. And that weighs heavily on me. There may still be something we can do about it. And at the very same time, I was participating on a conference call, preparing for an event that's coming up at the end of the month, where all the Reformed congregations of Toronto are putting together an evening to discuss the Me Too movement. And what does it mean for our congregations, for our communities? Both things true. Silence and speaking out. Another juxtaposition of this week, we buried an elderly member of our congregation. We said shalom to Goldie Davis, Aleha Shalom, may her memory be for a blessing. She attended Shabbat as long as she could with her children at her side. She made Shabbat the centerpiece of her family's life throughout all their days. And as her family expanded, so did her Shabbat table from New Brunswick, with 4 generations gathered around week in and week out. And juxtaposed to that, we have you, Lindsay. Today's bat mitzvah, a young Jewish woman just beginning her Jewish journey, just emerging as a steadfast Jew who understands her own strength and her responsibilities. We pray that you will maintain that shalshelet hadorot, that chain of the generations, as Goldie did. Both things true in 1 week. We see these things on Shabbat. I'm going to jump ahead to the grand finale. Number 7. It goes like this. Friday morning, Rabbi Rick Jacobs was with us, as Rabbi Sat said. Rabbi Jacobs is the president of the North American Reform Movement, and he came to say, Holy Blossom Temple is a leading congregation in the movement, and we look to you, and we depend upon you, and we're proud of you. And he took a hard hat tour of our construction site, and he loved what he saw. And quietly, I was speaking with him about how to address the chief Ashkenazi rabbi of Israel, who would be here in Toronto. And so I did. Our Vice President, Darren Sikonik, was there. UJA leadership was there, and some rabbis from the community were there. We were probably 50 people or so in the room. And Rabbi Lau spoke about also the Shalshelet Hadorot, actually. He spoke about it should be the same Pesach and the same Purim and the same Shabbat candles and the same tefillin. He said, this is my goal, that I will make my great-grandparents proud. I want them to be proud of me, he said. And we must do everything we can also to make our great-grandchildren proud. I use that language too. You've heard it before. But he said he feels he has a great responsibility for the entire Jewish nation. And when it came time for questions, and time was short because Shabbat was coming, he answered a tough question about conversion. And if you don't know that story about the draft bill, you must study it and ask, what does it mean for me, for you, for our community, for diaspora Jewry? He also, during the Q&A, spoke of the Kotel. If you don't know that story, please read up on it. And then I was asked if I would like to give the final question, and I said yes, I would. One of the people accompanying him wanted to make sure I wasn't going to ask about conversion, that I wasn't going to ask about the Kotel, and I reassured him that I would not. Instead, I said, Rabbi Lau, you and I have something in common. Your father, the former Chief Rabbi Lau, was liberated from Buchenwald by Rabbi Schachter, alav hashalom. And Rabbi Schachter and my grandfather, Rabbi Lorge, alav hashalom, they were fellow chaplains in the American Army. And I like to imagine that maybe because Rabbi Schachter always had an eye on your father and watched over him, maybe my grandfather also knew your father. And Rabbi Schachter and Rabbi Lorge were very different. One was American-born. My grandfather was born in Germany. Rabbi Schachter, of course, an Orthodox rabbi. My grandfather, a Reform rabbi. But they worked shoulder to shoulder as soldiers and as rabbis side by side. And there was trust and there was mutual respect. And they knew that they had a shared purpose, a sacred task, a shared mission to serve God and the Jewish people. And so they didn't need to even discuss it, I imagine. They just knew they could depend upon one another. And I said, I worry that we don't yet have the same trust and mutual respect today. So I asked him, what is it that you would like me to say to my congregation this Shabbat? We are more than 5,000 Jewish souls. And what would you like all the other leaders here today to take away with them? Can you please tell us, give us some confidence that there is something like Klal Yisrael, like a totality of the Jewish people? Reassure us, please. that we are Am Echad. And his answer, it really breaks my heart to tell you. He said, I'm not sure. He said, they haven't succeeded. So what can I do? He says, I see the way it's going for North American Jewry, and he had given some statistics. He said, I'm afraid and I'm concerned about the next generation. I want it to be the same Shabbos candles, and you need to prove it to me if you are sure about it. And then he said, I pray for you and for your grandchildren. So I walked away with a heavy heart, and I wasn't alone. Many people approached me afterwards. In fact, by the time I got out of the parking lot, there was an email from an Orthodox member of the community who was there and was very shaken by what he had heard. He wrote, Chief Rabbi Lau has made me embarrassed to be Orthodox. Rabbi Splansky's question could not have been a surprise. Chief Rabbi Lau could have and should have said that he viewed it his responsibility to ensure both his grandchildren and Rabbi Splansky's grandchildren would light Shabbat candles. He wrote, Rabbi Lau's answer was vicious triumphalism. Those are not my words. Those are the words of an Orthodox Jew of this community. And then he went on to say, how this was permitted to happen is shocking and unfathomable and shameful. So I'm still sifting through. I'm using Shabbat to think this through. But let me say in conclusion to you that we have to, he says, I need proof. So let's give him proof. Let us show, as our Torah portion says, L'dorotehem, throughout all your generations. Let Holy Blossom Temple, now more than 162 years strong, let us show that we will light this light and it will burn eternally. And let there quickly be some solution so that the chief rabbinate of Israel does not have political power. It is damaging to world Jewry. It is damaging to the Jewish state. And please don't misunderstand me. We must look upon our Orthodox brothers and sisters as just that. And God forbid you hear my words and you distance yourself from Israel. God forbid. Instead, we must draw nearer to one another and let the bridges and the bonds be strengthened. These are tensions. I call them healthy tensions in 1 week, and I know you have your own as you reflect on your complicated week. So let us use Shabbat as the gift that it is. Shabbat is a God-given gift. We can devote ourselves to 6 days being partners with God in the work of creation, and then we can devote ourselves to Shabbat and be restored. As we sang last night, V'shamru v'nei Yisrael, the people of Israel, shall protect Shabbat. We shall keep the Shabbat in every generation as a covenant for all time. It is a sign forever between me, God says, and the people of Israel. For on 6 days the Eternal One made heaven and earth, and on the 7th day God rested, refreshing the soul. Can you hear that song?